think I figured out why I like Fallout Shelter. Like, having an ant colony, but I can tell the ants what to do.
And I get to tell the ants like what to build and what shape to build the ant colony. It's not just like having an ant colony. Although it really feels like a exhaustively like overwhelming ant farm, ant colony type thing. I like it. That's what I'm talking about, of course. But there's something about it that's kind of it's been on my mind for the last week. It's like simulating a vault, a shelter, a fallout shelter, and this game takes place in the future, and it's the game takes place from the role of the overseer, who just kind of tells all the dwellers what to do. And I guess there's a weird control element that's also amusing, because you can send them off to die in the wasteland if you really want to. Most of the time they come back with cool stuff. But it's simulating, a end of world scenario. And then it occurred to me, and saying, well, people go to Disneyland and simulate, being a princess or being a prince, or I mean, I guess there are people out there who name their animals after the villains in Disney movies, and that's also acceptable, because why not? We like villains. In the wrong context, the anti-hero is a villain, so. But this game, Fallout Shelter, and I've only dabbled with the actual Fallout series. I really like Fallout Shelter. There's something about it it's like very low intensity, almost like reading a comic book instead of reading a book. And there's just enough story that I'm entertained by it.
Well, there's so much lore that they can do these tangential stories and make them work really well.
Oh, yeah. That's half the fun, is something in the game mentions a vault number, and then I think, oh, cool, let's go see what's going on in that vault. And there are entire volumes dedicated to Vault 414 or Vault 40 or Vault 44 or Vault 37, or insert vault number here. Like hours. I listened to one last night. It was 2.5 hours long. From a video game. That's nuts.
Have you played any of the Alan Wake series?
No, I've watched a few videos about it. That game looks pretty interesting too.
It's the lore that is the most interesting. I got into it through Control, but I think there's only a few games that have been able to pull off let me rephrase that. Within different genres of games, only a few are able to pull off that type of world building where they can establish the main video game story and then have all these tangential game spin-offs that still work really well. There's I think the most obvious is the Mario franchise, but you have, it's there's niche games like Persona, what's it called? Blaze Blue, Guilty Gear. There's fighting game, a lot of fighting games like Mortal Kombat will get spin-offs, and some of them will work, some of them won't.
Yeah, there's a Sub-Zero
Fallout
game, I remember.
Yeah, I mean there was a Kami game that was a Street Fighter spin-off. It happens, but it's not often that it's successful, and I think that's where the Fallout games have been able to. They have casual games that are involved, and then they have RPGs, and then they have online multiplayer, So they basically have any type of game you'd want to play, you can get within that lore. And now they're about to have a TV show, so it's like them having multiple types of media. Once you're in it, it becomes, I think, like it's like a treasure hunt. Once you understand the if you start to value the lore, everything becomes like, oh, this is a new little gold nugget I found of Fallout. But then people who are not necessarily into the overall lore but get into individual games might never explore the rest of it, and that's perfectly fine because individual games are so they work as standalone units. So I think that's one of the seeing the success of how Fallout has been able to diversify its media but not really fail on any of those fronts. It's like, it's possible. I think it just takes care. Not really caring about if they're going to make money because they know they're going to make money. So it's like, if you know you're going to make money on the product, you might as well put the extra effort into making it the highest quality possible, because it's like, yeah, is it better to make $800 million with less quality, or put extra $200 million and make $600 million? And it's like, on the one hand, people who are just all about money would say the 800 million's better. But if you make a better quality product, that can result in more spin-offs and more depth to the franchise. And that's where I think like the Alan Wake franchise is a great example of anything that they make within that series. It's like every possible iteration of what could have happened in that game is going to be exhausted because the people making it are just that type of developer. And it's like the Max Payne series could have been that, but it didn't get the attention paid to it in the later series or in the later games, where you know, it's wild to see over and over quality winning out over just trying to exploit something for profit, but people not learning the proper lessons from it, and then industries like banking on exploitation and then dying off. And that's what it feels like. That's what's happening with the game industry now. And I don't know how long this downsizing is going to last, but I don't think the result is going to be better games with this particular downsizing movement that's happening right now. They've learned all the wrong lessons from, I won't even say from industry, it's from the interpretation of the industry from the outside and the way that other people see gaming sales as either being successful or not. It's like GTA, for example. So much of GTA success has been online and in between iterations, but they've had enough upfront success that people automatically assume that whatever they do is going to be a success. The first reports are saying that potentially this game could cost, the next GTA game could cost anywhere between $100 and $250 just to buy the game. And that doesn't include anything that's bought on top of that in as we know in modern gaming, they're always trying to sell DLC or sell skins or figure out a way to add extra monetization angles on top of the fact that you already paid $70 potentially, or maybe even more for this, just for entry into this game. And so if Rockstar sets that precedent and is successful, it's going to teach everybody else the wrong lessons. And I have no doubt that they're going to be successful. It's a matter of, what are they going to do? Are they going to come out and try to price games at this exorbitant price line so that it's really restrictive? Because I don't know. When society has certain things that are prohibitive because of cost, but those things are also accessible in theory to other people, in the notion of, if I'm a kid walking around at Target, I can walk by the PS5. I can go pick it up off the shelf. I can take it to the register. But do my parents have enough money to buy that PS5? At this point, a lot of kids are going to say, no, their parents don't have it. So it's actually only accessible in theory to a large percentage of the population. The way that affects those people's psyches ultimately affects all of society, and we have to deal with those people too. So I'm not sure that it's a good thing to have a society where we're throwing $250 video game experiences in poor people's faces and not giving them. It's not like poor people should just automatically get the next video game system, but they should be able to go play those things. Like, the idea that somebody who's not born into a wealthy family shouldn't be able to play a video game just because they were born into the wrong family, that's actually sick. That's a disgusting idea and a disgusting thought, that certain pleasures that have been created by society are only accessible by birth lottery. And like, of someone being someone who didn't get a bad birth ticket, I think the idea of those birth lotteries are absolutely fucking insane. And we have enough resources to make those birth lotteries a thing of the past. But if anything, it's only because certain people who win those birth lotteries feel better about themselves knowing that other people didn't. And I think that's really like the only thing holding society back from not having, because there's always going to be inequality. I don't think there's the potential to solve equality, inequity completely. The issue is we can raise the standard for the lowest. That's something that can be accomplished. And it's something that I think society has done a decent job of in the last 10,000 years, maybe. But there's certain things, like if you look at just like the last 2,000 years, all of the technological advances haven't really offset the cost of loss of empathy. And I think further, the actual cost of empathy may be more damaging than the benefit that we've received from the technology that's made us lose a lot of the empathy. But I don't think it's the technology. It's not the technology's fault so much as society that doesn't value empathy and then the people who want to exploit that, making society full of propaganda that further devalues empathy, as if even if empathy is nothing but a tool, there are other tools that get valued more than that specific tool. So in a modern society that has televisions and internet and cell phones, if those things are tools that have value, empathy is way less valued than all of those things, and those things are then used to make empathy less valuable. And so that's where I'm looking at the cumulative impact. It doesn't feel, I think that's where in the short term we've lost, like we've started to go on a negative trajectory, but that's only because in the last like 50 years it was more on a positive trajectory. And I think that's where people who are under 40, it's more difficult for them to see the overall positive trend because they've only been in sort of a regression, whereas like in the last 30 years all of the empathy that was gained in the 20 years prior to that started to get attacked, and that was the subject of attack. So like anybody who's under 40 has only seen the empathy that was fostered between the 60s and the early 90s come under attack and get destroyed. And I think it's not linear, and it goes in waves, and a lot of the empathy that came under attack hasn't been eroded. Some of it has, but most of it hasn't. So I'm like looking at those waves and those trends, and it's actually positive, but it's really easy because of the way we're inundated with media, I think, to get wrapped up in the negative, which is also why it's good to diversify access and exposure to media. Back to the notion of like poor people shouldn't be restricted to access just because they have a bad birth lottery ticket.
Man, I think it was like a TEDx talk.
I mean, we're living in a TEDx world, unfortunately, and everything is way more complex than it seems, and there's no simple solutions or simple answers ever. And so if you start a subject and see it to the end, like, yeah, we're gonna discuss like 25 different fucking things, and we're still just talking about why poor people should be able to play PlayStation 5,
you know,
or PlayStation 6 or whatever.
I've been in the last 2-3 weeks I've been playing my normal video games and branching out into a few others that are like whatever free on like Amazon's whatever Twitch gaming network, and you know, real GPUs, not just the integrated graphics. And I've found that the vast majority of games that have replay value don't rely on graphics at all. They're like they're entirely story driven. In fact, Star Trek, the game that I play all the time, I turned it up to, you know, like ultra graphics, you know, ultra massive graphics, bloom everywhere. Enabled all of the stuff. And I ended up turning a bunch of it down because it was too much bloom and too much distraction and too many textures. And it's like, yeah, this is just annoying. It doesn't help me. This doesn't improve my gaming experience. It just gives me a distraction that actually hinders my gaming experience. And then I find myself turning it down. What's wrong with me? That's like the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be turning this stuff all the way up and extracting all the juice.
Well, I think
there's a point where there's like too much visual effect doesn't actually help. It just takes away.
If there's no substance, I think this is what you're dancing around. It's like, if there's no substance, then it needs to be glossy and have 8K resolution, and, you know, all the assets need to be the most detailed and super high design. But if you have substance and mechanics, you don't need any of that. And then those things just become aesthetic dressing, which they always meant to be. They weren't meant to be the substance.
So
and I think that's
the best part, of course, though, is I didn't notice a dramatic improvement in gameplay performance, just more visual effects. And so when I turned it down,
if anything, it makes the gameplay performance worse when you turn up the.
Well, no, I mean with non-integrated graphics cards, I didn't notice a substantial improvement in anything gameplay related versus integrated graphics. Like the Intel UHD 630 integrated graphics that I played Star Trek on for the last 2 years. That I didn't notice it was not smoother. I didn't notice less tearing. I didn't notice any weird. There weren't any fewer moments where the game is just like, whoa, there's a lot going on. You know, none of that stuff. Like just normal gameplay, nothing different.
Well, but even that's what I mean. Like if you want improved gameplay, you turn all the graphic settings down. Like that's been the standard way to get the most responsive, lowest latency gameplay since Quake. And that's where you see like even in first person shooters, the people who are playing at the highest levels put their things on like the lowest settings because it even gets more contrast between the player and the background. If you're playing a shooter, the lower the resolution settings. And it's like things like that where
the cell shading starts to stand out. It pops out on the screen.
It's like I don't know if there's any game where turning up the graphics is going to improve the gameplay. Like I just don't know if that, like maybe in one that's been perfectly optimized and also has been built with those GPU or integrated graphics settings perfectly in line, maybe, but I think 95% of games are going to suffer from gameplay degradation if you turn up the graphics settings.
I feel like Dance Dance Revolution might be the only game that actually would benefit from incredible eye candy. Probably, but maybe not.
Well, and on that note, when they did that with Tetris, it has its novelty and it does give a different vibe to it when you get extra stuff in the background that's more just eye candy for almost no reason except for the eye candy, but it wears off and it's like the mechanics are why you're there.
Yeah.
Ultimately. So I think that again, seeing Tetris versus Tetris Effect, the extra visual stuff is cool. It's definitely not unappreciated, but it's always going to be the mechanics. And in that case, there's like a story with Tetris, but the mechanics have always been the focus that it's always easy to forget the story, which is like, you know, I think that's a testament to like, I think it's like Breakout 2 has a story. Like, there's elements of, you can have a game that's all mechanics and then just retroactively fit a story onto it, or the story's just not that necessarily good, and the mechanics just make up for it. So, or it doesn't. The mechanics are so good you don't need a story at all. But then
that's the way Street Fighter feels. But Street Fighter has a story.
Oh yeah, for sure. But then you get those story time, or I forget what they're called, like story, whatever they're called, tell time tales. It's like you just are clicking through the events and you're not actually like playing anything, but they're called games because they're digital. And so it's like all story and no mechanics, which it'd be like, is a choose your own adventure book a game? kind of a little bit, but not really. And I think that's what the Telltime tales are closer to than anything. But it's a useful medium, and I think that's where I'm like, the choose your own adventure story also being able to be more digital, it has its place, but they tried it on Netflix and it didn't really work out either. So
Yeah.
I don't know who that audience is. It's like a weird gap.
I remember that. I don't remember the name of it, but I remember
It was a Black Mirror.
it was like a variation. It was like a long drawn out. Okay, so Black Mirror stuff works in like the 15 to 20 minute length, like a Twilight Zone episode or Outer Limits. But making an entire whole ass pretend movie that also has this illusion of participation, that was not right. That was like too much black. It's the same issue with like Saturday Night Live. Those are skits and they work as skits, but once they become these drawn out movie length endeavors, it's just not right for the genre.
It's too involved and not involved enough somehow.
Yeah. It's like they try really hard to phone it in that level, because just doing the normal episodic endeavor isn't enough for an entire whole ass movie. And movies shouldn't be episodic portions of a series, which we've learned in the now 40-something episode long MCU extravaganza. Like there is something that the concept of too much of a good thing is very real. And then there's also just, like expecting a really, really, really nice burger and getting fast food at really nice burger prices. Actually, no, it's Netflix, so it's still not really nice burger prices.
Yeah, and that's where, I don't think that was even really the first time that had been tried. But then you get games like Heavy Rain or Detroit Become Human that are wildly successful. So I think it's the audience has to be mentally in a state that's like prepared for the media, or for that type of semi-engaged media. It's like such a weird gap to me, because I guess I've never really gotten into it, and I keep trying to find games that look like they're going to interest me, and I just get bored of like looking at them. I get bored because I don't even know what it is about that type of gameplay. But then you get if you're monitoring something, like in the situation of Fallout where you're basically the overseer monitoring shelters, the passiveness is built into the story in a way that makes it more fun. And so it's not the same type of, like, building that passivity into the story, it somehow changes it. I don't know what it is, but to me, those two things become way more different mentally. And one is fun to me and the other just doesn't even make sense, to the point where I know, saying it out loud, I know it doesn't sound logical, because it's not. There's something emotional about it.
Yeah. That's why I think Fallout Shelter is kind of like a strange simulation of an ant farm or an ant colony or whatever that thing is. It's like two panes of plastic sandwiching some sand, and you get ants, and they create a whole bunch of network of of stuff, except it's more involved. And of course, when I feel like I've had enough with it, or I've gone the wrong path in developing my vault, I can just erase half of it and start over. And that's a pain in the butt, but sometimes it has to happen. It's like SimCity with a survival element to it. And some kind of weird logistics coordination aspect. I never thought I'd be playing like a management game, like resource management game like this, where it's really simple. It's, you know, it can be boiled down to a tablet. It doesn't even need more. It doesn't need much more than a phone, which is really intriguing to me that they managed to make this whole game fit into such a small space without feeling cramped. And then, of course, on a giant screen, it's just incredible. You barely have to look for anything. But it's a game that ran just fine on integrated graphics. It didn't require any kind, and it's free. It didn't require any kind of hardware acceleration at all. Like I've noticed absolutely zero change in gameplay or stability with a real GPU. I think that should be the standard. Can it run on integrated graphics? No? Oh, well, have fun selling that. I've been playing a bunch of Nintendo, like GameCube and Super Nintendo emulators lately. And those games are so much fun. And I never realized that Super Nintendo games could look so good, or that Nintendo 64 games could look so good. Like, unbelievably good. Sharp as can be. Mario Kart Double Dash. That is probably one of the most fun racing games ever. The whole Mario Kart series is probably one of the most fun racing games that exist. Like a full, like, white knuckled experience. Like, I found myself clenching the controller with my right hand, and at the end of it, like, I'm just letting go, and it's hard to let go of the controller because it's just like, oh no, I gotta make it. There's a shell coming after me. Oh, lightning! Now I'm tiny. Pick up the double cube, which I don't want because I don't want to change the weight distribution on the go-kart. But whatever. And all the scenery goes by so fast, you really can't tell that it's just flat panels with like the most basic texture, which really is just like three different colors that are very, very tastefully applied in a kind of a pattern.
Well, and I guess that's where phones have kind of closed a gap between like a GPU that was made maybe 10 years ago and like the best maybe 7 years ago and like the best smartphone the processing's not that far off.
Yeah.
So that's where it can get away with that. You know, the integrated graphics cards by proxy are then pretty powerful, where like if it's an integrated graphics card into a desktop or a laptop, it's gonna be really powerful actually. So
Yeah. Like even the 8th generation i7 with Intel's UHD 630 graphics, that was capable of running every game that I wanted to play smooth as can be. And when I wanted to play GTA, I fired up something with a real GPU. GTA definitely benefits from having more video RAM. Like the more the merrier. Holy crap, it just gets better with more video RAM. Like actual on card, fast as all else video RAM. That game does a lot, like all the time. There's always a lot going on in that game, even when it seems like there's nothing happening. And then they make it seem like they're not doing anything at all, which is, I think, the brilliance of that game and that whole franchise now, is they've worked their world up to a point where everything just kind of happens and we accept it because we expect it to happen. And it's only when it doesn't happen that we think something's not right.
well, you know, I think if shit works more, I wouldn't be so anti-capitalist. But one of the big issues is that you'll get games that are being made, for example, and you'll pay $60 and it won't be optimized, and then you'll need to run the highest GPU or whatever because the people who made the game didn't put the time in that actually would have made it accessible on lower level game or lower powered hardware. And it's not because it was impossible, it's just because they didn't put the time into it. And I think that's where, like, even when it's pushed out on the hardware, a lot of times shit'll break. And that's what's frustrating to me with, like, I'm still hesitant to buy a new game anymore. I think Street Fighter 6 may have been the last new game I've bought that was just out, or like just released.
Man, there's so many free games offered up every day. It's hard for me to justify spending money on some of these things at this point, because if I'm tired of something, I'll just go see what's available. And chances are, even if there isn't something that's interesting, I can find something else at that game portal that has all the stuff. They got plenty of free stuff. All you got to do is look for it, and then boom, free. Like one of my favorite games of all time, Killer Instinct. I just discovered that game is free to play now. Holy crap. I spent like 6 hours playing that game the other night. I don't want to play it anymore. I'm like Killer Instinct out.
Well, it's only see, this is the issue. It's only free now because people like myself bought copies, that's perfectly valid, but that's something that needs to happen more frequently, where if they sell enough copies of a game, they should just make it free, like they did with No Man's Sky.
Yeah.
Or, but it's like, yeah, I bought a copy of Killer Instinct fucking, 3 or 4 years ago. And it's like, the cost of it, I got my money out of it. And once I got my money out, I didn't feel like I lost anything. But I think that's where a lot of the games being as high as they are when they're AAA, I think that's when people feel like they're getting ripped off or losing money. Like, especially if you compare it to a game from like a independent studio, where if you buy an early access game where you can actually give them feedback that they're going to take into the game when they're developing it, see that game being developed over time and participating in it, it's not the same as being sold an incomplete piece of shit that they may or may not fix. And so I think that's where, like, free games, there's a whole lot of games in that range that you don't really need to buy games anymore. But if you spend money on games, you should be able to get something that's working. Or if you're engaging in early access buying, the developers shouldn't be able to, like, dip out on the project without giving you a refund. And I think that's where there should be some implicit contract that if you're buying an early access game, that's with the express understanding that the developers are intending to complete it, or have the means to complete it, which is, or in that I think this is where the Kickstarter minimum raised litmus for if something's going to be finished or not is good. Like, if somebody's going to sell an early access game on Steam, they need to let us know how many early access copies they need to sell so they don't go out of business before they complete the game. So I'm not buying something that never had a chance to be complete because I was the only person that bought it. And I had no idea, because it's different if I have some sort of concept of it. But if I'm buying something with the impression that it's going to be completed and then only 2 people buy it and then the developers never complete it, then it's like, I guess that's legal, or, it's legal, but is that ethical for game selling platforms to facilitate that kind of exchange? Because I don't know, the one side got money and the other side got an incomplete thing that didn't make them happy. So should that exchange have happened? Probably not.
Yeah.
And just because it was legal doesn't mean it should be facilitated.
Yeah, I've backed Kickstarters that ended up not giving me anything other than like a discount on a future purchase. That kind of ruined it for me. That was one of the last Kickstarters I ever participated in. For a shutter control mechanism. It was supposed to be this hardware optical sensor. And in the end, they offered a discount for iPhone software. Instead of the like laser eye optic sensor with dedicated control software, like a piece of hardware that you run on batteries that doesn't need a fucking computer or a connection to the internet to operate. Like, what good is that? What good is a device that needs to be connected to the internet when you want to use the device in a lightning storm out in the middle of nowhere where there is presumably no internet? I was so pissed. It was going to be like a I think like a $10 or $15 discount on $100 app. Like, fuck. I'm willing to spend $100 on like a DAW or on on actual software that I use to create stuff. Maybe even a game over time, but not on an app that's limited to one generation of iPhone that's being run by a company that can't even produce the hardware they promised to produce. That doesn't give me any kind of expectation that their software is going to last beyond that one generation. And of course, Kickstarter is like insulated from this because, you know, they helped get funding for Reading Rainbow and other projects that have managed to help people.
Yeah, I supported a Kickstarter project years ago, and it still hasn't been completed.
Oh, that's
Which
good.
is where I'm like, you know, knowing
Classic Kickstarter right there. Hasn't been
knowing
completed.
that it's possible for those things to happen. It's like I'm not against people who need to get some sort of like financial boost to make something happen. It's just when that financial boost is coming from regular people and not from like a government grant, it creates problems. And we just have too much money in the government for grants not to be readily available for these things, in sense of they're out there, but they're not actually easily accessible. And the way that they've become so competitive, even the people who are qualified for grants aren't even really getting the grants that they need, let alone like somebody who's trying to do something experimental.
It should be easier for people to get grants. Why is it so difficult?
I mean, on the one hand, I think it's good that they've tried to make more. There's the implicit idea of more accountability when there's more bureaucracy, but that's not the result. Like, we don't actually get a more accountable use of grants, even though they've increased the amount of bureaucracy that's involved in accessing them. So that's where I'm like, I know what they're trying to do, but that's not what they're doing. And because they're not doing that with military industrial, it's like we'd be better off as a society if they treated grants the way they treat arms and treat the way they throw money at ammo in other countries, or the way they arm militants as opposition in other countries, the way they just do it without any sort of, there's no real checks on the spending, but that type of unchecked spending, if we could only get that towards grants in America, it would be I'm not gonna say utopian version, but way closer to the Star Trek than what we have now.
I mean, it seems like there's a big culture of let's throw some money at it, but not for. But I don't know. Maybe there are just a lot of hoops. Maybe the hoops are integral to the system.
Which again, I get the hoops, and in theory, they're meant to be there for accountability and responsibility and rationing, but the end result is almost inevitably less and less money going towards social justice angles. And if it's meant for social justice, it's through the form of police. That's the only time money's rerouted, and that's kind of where seeing how like PBS, for example, has been defunded slowly, and then the schools have been defunded, and then there's nowhere for kids to hang out. It's like they're making it impossible for kids to do anything but get in trouble or join the army. Or join the, I mean, not the army, the military. Like, if you're not good at sports, there's nothing else for kids to do in this country. It doesn't seem like, I can see why people get into these conspiracy mindsets, because over time it seems like there's some coordinated whittling of these aspects of society, and I don't know if there was, but there doesn't actually have to be. If societies collectively decided not to invest in children or in children's activities, this is the end result. It doesn't need to be some like top-down hierarchical instruction. No Child Left Behind didn't help. It definitely didn't help.
They should have called that Operation Spotlight.
You know, knowing public schools weren't great before No Child Left Behind, but they definitely got worse after that. Knowing how much government policy can have a detrimental effect, it seems obvious that then government policy should be able to have that equal positive effect.
The policy of the government is to observe, to make sure that things are going their way, but they don't have their own policy to observe themselves, to make sure their observations aren't getting in the way. It's like there's no oversight to say, hey, wait a second, our activities are actually causing more problems than they're solving.
No, I mean,
I'm pretty sure that the whole, like, you know, I'm not even sure what to call it anymore. The quantitative testing that they do, like the nonstop, just the where the result is that students are taught to take tests instead of to think. Like I think that's a big problem, is that has a net effect where when that's the standard, then, oh yeah, well, we can just like analyze everything and throw it through our machine. It'll churn out some numbers and spit out a solution.
I think that was the sentiment for about 20 years.
But this is where it's gotten us.
Yeah.
To a place where education is now no longer being managed by educators, but by the state. And the state's trying to rewrite history in some locations. There's just not enough There's not enough time to teach. Is there just not enough time to teach humanities? Is that what's going on? Schools, they're not able to produce numbers that justify why it's important to expose people to literature, like actual literature, not just, disposable words on a page with pictures and stuff that links to other things, like a magazine. Although some magazines are pretty damn close to literature.
When you're saying these things, it's making me realize I think the growth of empathy had to do with colonized people finally being able to tell their stories, and in the process identify perpetrators. And in many cases it would be like states or state-sponsored perpetrators, and when people associated with those states got enough numbers, then they started attacking those voices. And I think that's where you're seeing the like anti-DEI stuff, where the people who felt as if diversity becoming ubiquitous would impact their lives in a negative way. When enough of those people existed, now we have a wave of anti-DEI that looks like it came out of nowhere, but it's really like the culmination of like 20 years of different groups of oppressed people being able to call out this specific group that's doing a lot of the oppressing. And I think while they're galvanized, it becomes easy to see what's happening now and feel more negatively about the trajectory. But again, I think the only reason they're becoming vocal is like a dying animal is its most dangerous. And it's like they're on their last leg. And it's because we've now figured out all the different atrocities colonialism has committed, and we've been able to cross-reference them, and now we're like, oh shit, they've been doing this shit for hundreds of years. They just move it around. Like, if you think the CIA invented the fucking drug war, then you don't know shit about the opium wars. And it's like, if you don't understand the connection between what Britain did to China and India and what the American government did to the black communities through crack, then you just haven't read enough. And I think that's where we're finally getting to a point where in order to read those things, you had to have access to it. But now we're getting to a point where everybody can start to read each other's history and start to be like, oh shit, the British people did this to you? Fucking Americans doing this to us now. And that's where like the idea that black Americans would have anything in common with white Americans against a Chinese person, it's absurd. But with them understanding that the American way of life is dependent upon other ways of life being demonized, and also not allowing any other way of life to be perceived as possibly being better than American. Once it's understood that that's necessary for the American side, I don't know if it's necessary for the Chinese side because I'm not on that side. So like, I could make inference that it's necessary for the nation, but that may not necessarily be true because they've had a long enough history that they just don't worry about those things. Maybe they do. I don't know. But America definitely does. And so we have a lot of propaganda that makes it actively seem like other countries are doing things that are worse than America to make America seem better in ways that to a non-white person, but also to someone who's not white or black and not in America, if they don't understand that those things are coming from a very white, very cishet male perspective, they can get the wrong idea and think those things apply to everyone. And then they come here thinking that what the propaganda that they have been given by cishet white males who are benefiting from a caste system were lies that were meant to reinforce that caste system. And I think that's where it becomes difficult for people who immigrate to integrate, because one side wants to immigrate or wants them to immigrate, but they also then don't know if they're dealing with somebody who's like a conservative immigrant who then wants to come in and reinforce the patriarchy, or if they're dealing with an immigrant who wants to deconstruct that patriarchy. And it's really difficult to know which one you're dealing with sometimes until it's too late. And I think that's where it's like, it's a very complicated landscape, obviously, but it's even more complicated. It's made even more complicated by the fact that we have a lot of conservative immigrants.
I mean, America's political system has a pretty conservative landscape to begin with. Is that one of the things that attracts people to this country? I always thought it was opportunity, but maybe it is the political landscape that people like. How much opportunity is correlated to political alignment?
Well, I think political alignment usurping actual conversation then makes it difficult to get to the conversation.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But how much of that is actually a filter? Like, how much of that stuff essentially exists within its own kind of bubble because someone's political alignment would prevent them from even engaging in that dialogue in the first place? Every so often, I'm reminded of like the tension between town and gown, because Bloomington is a university town, it's a college town, and I start to wonder, like, well, how many things just aren't talked about because the concerns of the people who live in the county are probably irrelevant to people who live on campus. to a lesser extent, but even then, like, that kind of proximity to thought or ideas or access to information or different ideas, like, how much effect does that have on just general dialogue? Because I'm kind of convinced that the person who lives out in podunk middle of nowhere is going to have a completely different set of ideas informing them about what's happening in the rest of the world than somebody who lives in, say, Chicago or New York or Detroit or, any megalopolis for that matter.
You there?
I am.
Okay, it cut out for a second. Man, on a side note, I'm already tired of AI and everything. It's
why?
It's eating up resources and not making anything better. Like my fucking browser doesn't need AI. My desktop doesn't need AI, but they both got added and they're both eating up resources and I can't turn them off completely. It's like because they're trying to add AI to everything like they were doing with blockchain, it's like there's this extra fucking processing going on constantly in the background of my computer shit now that I can't turn off. Or at least it's way more difficult to turn off than it should be. And I've been like, I don't know if this is happening to everyone, but if you check your taskbar, like when you close your browser, it's still fucking running in the background. And when you open up the processes, it's like the AI shit. And so that's where I'm like, we're in this weird period of tech companies trying to survive, having been in a period where they were just making money by existing, thinking that they were doing progress and changing our UIs every fucking 6 months for no goddamn reason. And now the thing that they did is add AI to everybody's shit for no fucking reason. And I don't know, I know I notice it because I'm obsessive with my computer speed and always trying to pay attention to oh, is this working slower than normal? And so I check to see if something is causing it to run slower than normal. And on multiple machines, it's always this fucking AI shit now. And that's where I'm like, I'm already sick of it. It's again, the same way companies didn't need an app for everything, AI doesn't need to be added to everything. And then the idea of companies just now powered by AI. Fucking why? Why do you need to be powered by AI? And that's not even, it's not even really powered by AI. They just added it on. And now it's just taking up extra shit. Again, I wouldn't be so mad at capitalism if shit worked. But none of this shit works right.
Yeah. I saw that Copilot thing pop up and I moved to disable it. It's bad enough that we've got phones that are just ready to answer questions. Hey Siri, and then I didn't mean to activate it. Or hey Google, or hey Cortana, or whatever the crap. I guess they're not doing Cortana anymore. It's Copilot. No, I don't want to disable Copilot. Yeah. Click on the start button, type settings, go to personalization, choose taskbar, toggle off the Copilot. I don't think that actually gets rid of it. I think that just stops it from turning on when you boot Windows. Like the whole list of stuff that just happens. Is that the mountain they've given us to climb now? Keep up with all the crap that you're gonna have to turn off to maintain a stable system that doesn't do things that you don't want it to do?
Kind of. It started with shareware.
Man, it's like on the Linux end, you have to work really hard to keep it doing all the things that you want it to do smoothly and effortlessly. But once you have it, it's nice and tuned and stable until there's an update. And then you've got to go and do it all over again. But then Windows, it's like everything is done for you right out the gate. You just got to undo everything every time. And then, of course, there's OS X where they just do shit and then they don't give you options, because if you're using a Macintosh product, you're probably not trying to make any decisions about it. You just want to use software and do stuff with it. Because there are no options. There's the Apple way. We're it's an interesting space right now, because the impending end of Windows 10 in 2025 means that there is a ticking clock on, anybody whose device requires the latest and greatest security and is not willing to spend money on a subscription to receive the same enterprise updates that corporations will be receiving, assuming that they buy a volume license for continued support. And, part of me hopes that Microsoft will see the folly of their way, considering that there is 10 times the number of Windows 10 computers as there are Windows 11 computers that are still running just fine. I really want a Linux distribution that's as easy to install and operate and move into and use regularly for just casual computing as Windows is to me now, or even OS X. I can hop on a Macintosh and be just comfortable as can be. But for whatever reason, I feel like I have to relearn how to use a computer every time I install Linux. And I think that's the dilemma, is that it's fine for the person who's constantly doing that, who really likes tinkering. But I don't want to tinker. I want to play games and make music and edit photos and laugh at videos about cats and dogs doing funny stuff. And I've tried playing those games that are hack the system. You'll learn how to use JavaScript at the same time. Well, I learned how to use JavaScript a while ago, and it didn't make this game any more fun. But I think that's one of those instances where games shouldn't feel like work. Which I'm pretty sure that's offensive, actually. Here's a game. It's called Fill Out This Spreadsheet. We're going to tell you all the stuff to enter so you can fill out your own spreadsheet equations and make it do cool things and build charts. That's like a game that nobody wants. A game that probably a lot of people would play, that it would be like that Dirty Jobs. That show where the guy goes and does the things that nobody wants to do.
Oh, yeah, Micro.
Yeah. I think if there's a simulation game that could deliver a broad range of experiences, like really tough, nasty jobs, like you got to go down and, clean out this clogged up sewer. And it came with this, and when you when you get the subscription every month, they send you out like a olfactory package to like enhance gameplay so that, you know, when you're playing in the trash, it smells like trash. It's not real trash. It should be like, you know, some chemicals that put off the smell of some trash. Some egg smell, maybe. And
You seen Power Wash Simulator?
what?
Not making that up.
Seriously, this is a game. Holy shit, this is a game. It's for Warhammer. It's a Warhammer.
No, they just released a crossover.
Oh my goodness. It's the whole goal. Their entire business models based around power washing things.
The kicker would be is if the game could be attached to like a real robot.
And actually clean things.
Right.
Well, that would just be convenient. People paying money to play a game to operate a robot somewhere to clean somebody else's stuff.
Yeah, they did a Back to the Future crossover, so you can watch the DeLorean.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's just too much. You chase Marty McFly with a power washer, it looks like.
Clean off the clock tower.
Man, this is a first-person shooter for somebody that doesn't actually want to shoot people. This is actually, you know what? This reminds me a lot of Super Mario Sunshine, because a lot of that game is running down a graffiti artist who looks like Mario and then spraying, you know, graffiti with water and cleaning surfaces off and killing giant potted plant monsters that live in the paint. And you get to operate the time machine, so that's pretty rad. I'm not sure it's like $25 rad, but it's definitely pretty rad. God, Power Wash. SpongeBob. What? Okay, I guess you can use a power washer under the sea and clean off a pineapple. I'm not sure. I don't need to know any more about this game.
But that's just your notion of like, yeah, people would play those games.
Yeah, people will actually play that game. I mean, there are like semi-truck simulators. And tow truck driving simulators.
There's a goat simulator.
You know, I always thought that was just a joke until I discovered that it's not a joke. And
I think they're on third iteration now.
yeah. Man, like supermarket simulator. Okay, this is no. You wander around and you do inventory and you ring people up. And you merchandise products and count drawers down. Holy cow. This is terrible. $10. You got to pay. This is like paying money for simulated training for a job that somebody doesn't want. See, okay, so this is like the same kind of simulated cosplay action that I was thinking about earlier, how like, you know, like people go to Disney. Now you just go to your computer to pretend to be a supermarket cashier or inventory specialist or merchandiser. can work in a simulated liquor store, it looks like.
Well, and it's like you'd think people wouldn't want to do something so mundane, but then you look at the car mechanic simulator and it's way too involved. Like,
hey, you know what? This supermarket simulators gets very positive reviews. Overwhelmingly positive. Well, it doesn't surprise me the mechanic simulators are like complicated because cars are complicated. Oh, there's European Truck Simulator and American Truck Simulator. They are different. Farming Simulator. Have you ever wanted to drive a tractor? You know, I shouldn't complain too much because it's way more of a simulation than, like, you know, zombie survival, which we don't actually know what would look like. We definitely know what a farm looks like.
right, none of the zombie survival games address like toilet paper shortages and shit like that. So,
or you know,
we know toilet paper.
A physically decomposing body would dehydrate and turn into a giant stick of jerky after enough time passes, and they wouldn't be able to move or chase anybody because, you know, hydraulic systems rely on fluids.
I just like the idea that toilet paper would take out Americans before the zombies ever had a chance. We saw what happened during the pandemic.
Oh man, I wonder if any zombie games address toilet paper.
No, they don't. That's what I'm saying. That's like the biggest threat.
Oh, it looks like Roblox has a zombie survival game where you have to protect the toilet paper. Oh no. There's a game called Bustin', and it's about a world pandemic, and you shoot toilet paper at zombies. So somebody already thought about all this. We're not the only ones who are amused by how easily the economy came to a crawl because of a toilet paper run. If a simulation isn't necessarily, like, you know, done in a computer, like real life can be a simulation, what is our world like without the veil? Where, you know, America is not pretending or trying to pretend that it still has elements of the 50s, or trying to live like it's still the 50s in some places. I mean, what does this place actually look like if we start to, you know, peel away the layers?
Well, and I think that's where you get these Fallout stories.
Well, I mean, is that why there's so much, you know, outrage? Because people are finally being exposed to reality? Is all of the widespread tension on the internet the long-term effect of The Matrix, which is like 25 years old now?
And all of the wrong lessons, mind you.
Yeah.
It's like, I saw somebody lamenting about how they still didn't understand the architect's speech 25 years later, and I'm like,
Oh man.
yeah, that's That's about right.
Have there been any science fiction stories that the audience got right without, 2.5 decades of analysis to point them in the right direction?
The way people are talking about Dune about now, I don't know. I don't think so.
Oh, man. Oh, yeah, that's right. So there is a second Dune installment. I almost missed it. I noticed it. It popped up on one of the streaming sites. And I thought, it's out. Why didn't Google tell me about it? Why didn't I see anything about it on Facebook? And so I did some searching, and I learned that there were a lot of complaints. Whereas it came out swinging real hard in round 1. Apparently round 2 is taking quite a few liberties that are they conflict with the canonical timeline that everyone expects based upon the first installment. And it's
good. I don't understand why people, when they go to an adaptation, they like want it to follow the original beat for beat or whatever it's being adapted from. That to me is fucking stupid. It's like, why would you even bother to see the new thing if they're just gonna do the same beats? Just read the original.
I mean, if you want to see the original, if you want to see like a quite literal translation, Sci-Fi Channel did an excellent job. I'm not even sure that Dune translates into the kind of pacing that movies actually have.
Definitely not.
I think
Definitely
Dune
not.
is the kind of thing that, you have time to watch paint dry. You have time to watch plants grow. You have time to watch the corn sprout reading that book.
It's more something that would need David Attenborough involved than Arnold Schwarzenegger.
In its native environment of Arrakis, the sandworm can be found
exactly
in the deep, deep desert near the Fremen Sieges. Drawn out by long thumping from thumpers. Engineered from technology that can't be explained at the current technological level of the Fremen. I liked the Dune story universe. It was fun to read when I was in high school. And the visualization that we're getting with this current version is good. I really like the ornithopters. I think the ornithopters, they've like knocked it out of the park with the ornithopter. It'll just be interesting. Although, I think I'm more excited just at the idea of Christopher Walken as the Emperor. For whatever reason, I think I've seen him in too many roles. I'm just having a difficulty like dissociating him from my expectations. And that's kind of unfair of me because he's a brilliant actor.
I mean, but the Emperor was never the most imposing character in the story.
That's true.
Like, if anything, the Emperor is a joke. So I don't see that I don't see Christopher Walken carrying that baggage to the role as actually being anything but intentional. Like, he would have cast an unknown if he didn't want us to bring that. Like, the whole reason we can believe him as an emperor is because he's bringing the gravitas of every single role he's played before to that. But you can't detach that from him, which is, I think it has to be intentional.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I'm like, I can't think that's anything but a calculated decision, because knowing that the Emperor, you have to see him as a joke in order for him to be overturned the way he gets overturned by some random kid who is basically on a summer vacation. You know what I mean? Like, some fucking teenage kid, I don't know, I forget the age at the time, but whatever age Paul is, comes in.
Oh, he's like 14, isn't he? Like,
yeah, I thought he was super young. He comes in, he's like 14, comes in, dad gets murdered, starts this revolution, ripples throughout the entire fucking galaxy, overturns the emperor, has kids that grow into sandworms, fucking. The emperor is not the big bad.
He's 15. Paul is 15. We were close at 14. He might as well have been 14.
Yeah, same thing. But again, in the grand scheme, I feel like the emperor carries the title, and he has to have some gravitas, but you can't have him be like John Malkovich or somebody who's gonna come in and steal the entire movie and also be too good in that role that you're like, fuck, I forgot that was John Malkovich. Like, no, you're gonna know this is Christopher Walken the whole time, and his diction is gonna make the emperor a little funnier than the emperor should be, but that's also like the way he cast a Baron.
Yeah.
He's going for something.
Oh, everything in Dune is intentional. It's just interesting to read the Descent from the Peanut Gallery, because I haven't seen the movie yet. I've just been reading about it, and it's quite impressive what one can learn just by reading about all the things that people want to complain about. But yeah, the Christopher Walken part, that's got me. That's like, I mean, I admit, I accept that it was very intentional. It's just like, wow, what a strange decision. And so, yeah, you're probably right. It's probably like the goal is to make the viewer, me, say, whoa, what the heck? And I actually do want to see him as the emperor. There are a lot of people that I would like to see pretend to be an emperor, though, like John Turturro and John Leguizamo, and no, that's about it right now. But yeah, I didn't get any notifications that it was released or in theaters or like anywhere. I didn't even see it on the internet.
Well, they did the Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Oh, okay. So there was that, and you've been playing that, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was like something that was promised with the first movie, and it was just kind of like an interim, like, oh yeah, this is happening too, just to keep everyone paying attention. I didn't realize that it coincided with the release of the second movie. But that makes sense.
Well, I think we even talked about like why they were releasing that, and it was like, oh, they're probably about to put out the movie, and then yeah. I think, yeah. But also, let's not forget that Christopher Walken was the one that told us, if you walk without rhythm, you won't attract the worm. Let's not forget.
Oh, man.
You get with this or you can get with that. It was all about the walk of the fucking the Shaddai. That song is literally all about Dune.
What's that? It's Rockefeller Skank. No, it wasn't that. It was
Weapon of Choice.
Weapon of Choice, that's right.
It's easy to forget those lyrics are like.
Well, it doesn't really have lyrics.
I mean, it's literally all about the El Shaddai. If you walk without rhythm, you won't attract the worm. That's from fucking Dune, bro.
Holy crap.
That's from Dune.
Well, that makes it even more interesting then.
That's what I'm saying, yeah. There's like these Serendipitous connections. So.
Holy crap! Bootsy Collins was the vocalist on that.
Also, Traveling Without Moving, Virtual Insanity, yeah. Dune. Thank you, Dune.
Man. Stuff that I didn't know. Thank you. Holy crap.
Well, because then that's what it's funny. I didn't even really put it together until I watched the first Villeneuve one, and then it like reconnected it when they showed the walk. I'm like, oh shit, this is what he's talking about in the fucking Weapon of Choice track. But they did that really well in the first movie. So there's things about like the adaptation where with a limited amount of time in the form of a film, knowing that you don't have time to watch paint dry, you have to do summaries and short homage to the original piece in the form of adaptation.
Man, I want to see the Sardaukar doing the weapon of choice dance when they walk across the sand. That would be great.
Well,
it makes perfect sense. Like Dune page by page would take like an entire season, like Game of Thrones level production to do it like that, and it would be too much.
All of it wouldn't be worth putting in.
No, it wouldn't.
It would be, either.
It would be too much. It would not be fun. It would be a soap opera, a space opera. There's a lot of talking in Dune that I don't think is making it to the screen. There's a lot of waiting and explaining that's never made it to the Sci-Fi Channel version or the Lynch version. And like, it's not going to be in the Villeneuve version. It just takes up too much time.
Have you seen the Spice Diver edit?
I've not.
So there's this thing called the Spice Diver edit of the Lynch Dune, which takes the cut scenes and adds them in, and also adds a little bit of extra.
Oh, I have seen this.
Yeah, it's like a much better adaptation of the Lynch version. And the ending still sucks, but fucking. This is still a better version. They just make knowing why. This gets back to the executives thing again, but knowing that the Dune film was as bad as it was because of executives and not because of Lynch's vision necessarily, that just again gets to the notion of like, executives shouldn't be involved in any decision making concerning creative endeavors, which, you know,
man, Sting was
sounds
so
obvious.
Over the top as Fade. I'm actually very excited to see this new rendition of Fade, because Sting was like bouncing off the walls. I guess it's just the contrast of everyone else standing around like they don't have any lines and being told don't move. Like an unintended consequence. It makes him seem even more over the top.
Like, there's some of the casting choices were perfect and some of them were just off. So like Kyle MacLachlan, perfect. Fucking Patrick Stewart, perfect.
Sting.
But I also, you know, knowing Kyle MacLachlan's ties to David Lynch, I think he works better with Lynch, or not necessarily works better. Him and Lynch working together are gonna have his best output. Whereas, like, I don't know if that's necessarily true for Patrick Stewart. Patrick Stewart's just, you know, one of the all-time greats. Like, I don't know if Kyle MacLachlan is gonna. People who love him, but I don't know if history is gonna put him alongside the likes of Patrick Stewart.
Only as a footnote for Patrick Stewart's presentation of Gurney.
Right. I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's where I don't know if, like, someone doing a fantastic performance in a bad film is gonna be a note in history, except for the one you just said.
And being the first widespread released version of Dune. But you know, people really they either loved or hated the first Dune movie too, because they went from like the end of the first book to the end of like the sixth book in 10 minutes. Or not even that, like within like 30 seconds, really. Made it rain. Brought the end of it all. I think that the complaints about the newest Dune have less to do with like continuity of the book and more to do with like expectations based upon, you know, like what amounts to Mandela effect of the Dune movie. And then the Sci-Fi Channel was so long that, I mean, I've seen that several times, and I can't recall all of it. Although there is one scene when Paul's is like challenged in the...
Which one?
The Sci-Fi Channel one.
I mean, which one? There's like 3.
Oh, the first installment. There's a scene when he's like being challenged by the first group of Fremen he and his mother encounter, and they have a knife fight in their man, they look like diapers. They have a knife fight. They have a diaper knife fight, and one of the guys that is in the scene, he's got it looks like Chinese calligraphy on his, maybe it's Japanese calligraphy on his arm. You know, like a tattoo that they forgot to cover up. No one got mad about that.
I mean, I don't know if it was accidental then, because I feel like that's the type of shit they definitely don't let happen on accident.
Yeah, but you know, it's Sci-Fi Channel, and it was basically just a heavily produced stage play. Really well done. I liked their storytelling. I thought it was a very well done version of Dune.
Well, the only reason I say that is because even Abbott Elementary covers up tattoos.
Yeah.
Like, there's people on Abbott Elementary who have tattoos who I didn't know had them because they cover them up, where I'm like, holy shit. Even this show covers tattoos. Like, so even though, yeah, the Sci-Fi didn't have the biggest production, what's his name? James McAvoy was in that.
Yeah. Like, people you didn't think would be in a sci-fi movie, a Sci-Fi Channel movie.
Somebody else is in that one too. But that's the one thing that they did really well in that. The thing that I've seen in that version that I haven't seen in any other version, well, the Denis Villeneuve did it kind of, is when they like have Jessica talking one language and doing sign language in another language, but also doing it in French. So I think they did that in this one, or in the first one, briefly, but in the Sci-Fi version, the scene's way more involved. And so when you see that scene play out, it's like, holy fuck, they must have, I don't know how much time they had to put into rehearsing doing a scene back and forth where one person is talking a set of lines doing sign language that's a completely different set of lines, and then the other person is talking, doing sign language that's a completely different set of lines, and doing that. I mean, they don't have to learn the French.
Yeah, dissociating
so, like,
the spoken language from the signed language.
So that part isn't probably that difficult of like being able to speak and do like hand signals without knowing what they mean, but the output of the final like the culmination of the scene was something that has, I don't know if it's ever been done again. If anybody's ever tried to do something that complicated, like that's not complicated because of CGI. That's complicated because of what the actors and actresses had to do in the scene, and that's where, again, I don't know if anything can hit that level of complexity while also still being actually relevant to the story, because the implications of what they were doing in the story also made it so that you understood, like, not only are these people nobles, they're educated to the point of being able to speak in one language and do sign language in completely different language and understand both conversations at the same time. That's like some high level shit, because you have to maintain the mask conversation and still be able to, even if you're using the conversation you're saying out loud as cover, you still have to pay attention to that conversation and process that conversation while you're doing the actual conversation in the sign as what the characters would be understanding. So like I don't know if other versions of anything have been able to make someone come off so intellectually gifted, or like have that demonstrates intellectual prowess in a way that is not even really probably humanly possible, in a way that they demonstrated. Like, I'm sure somebody could, like, interpreters do it all the time. They listen and sign back what they hear. They're not necessarily engaging in conversation while doing that. Some may be able to on one level, but what was shown in that sci-fi Dune is like, again, that's like superhuman intellect, which they accomplished, and it's something, translating it from a page, I don't know if I would have thought to do that interpretation, but the way they pulled it off, I thought was still one of the best things I've seen in media adaptation yet.
Yeah. That movie's 24 years old. Or miniseries. Man, we've come so far. I'm still telling the same story. No, I think it's a good thing that this new iteration is taking some liberties with the timeline and accelerating things a little bit, because who has time for a story that unfolds over the course of 2 years? That's a series. That's a mini series. That should be on television.
It's Foundation.
Yeah, it's Foundation. It's exactly what it is.
Which, ironically, I feel like Foundation is doing a better job of telling the Dune story than Dune.
Wow.
Of course. But I am really impressed with, it feels like they're trying to do big screen visuals with small screen storytelling with Foundation, and I don't know if anything else is doing that, but they also have a lot of British actors who are stage actors transitioning, and so they care about the craft in a way that not to say that American actors and actresses don't, but American actors and actresses, I think, are raised in a culture that's more about selling a box office out than making a piece of media that's going to stand the test of time. Whereas Foundation is definitely going to stand the test of time. The new Dune stuff, I don't know.
I don't think anything.
I don't know.
I don't think any movie where the predominant color is taupe can withstand the test of time.
No, that's definitely not going to stand the test of time. Have you seen Arrival?
Oh, wait. The Charlie Sheen Arrival or the one with the squid aliens?
The Denis Villeneuve movie,
Okay,
whichever.
yes.
That may
That was-
stand the test of time
That's one
more
of the
than
most
Dune.
complicated science fiction movies that I've seen.
Right.
Like space.
And
space
it's because
alien.
it introduced some concepts that hadn't really been introduced in media.
Yeah.
So I think that may be why that film actually stands the test of time more than Dune. Same director, not same concepts, but space aliens, whatever. Like, he's dealing with those things in completely different ways. One, he even had a source material to work from. So that's where I'm like, or a set of source materials that he can adapt and then cut from and decide what he wants to take. I don't know, because we have a different mindset that we have to cater to during the modern audience era. I don't know if directors are capable of making shit that can stand the test of time right now, because our audience is so wrapped up in immediate rewards that they can't allow for things that need that room to breathe, like the actual Dune text. So I don't know if it's even his fault so much as, like, we have a stunted audience right now that trying to appease this stunted audience is only going to result in stunted work. So that's why.
And they're definitely not going to get the same kind of green light to do the MCU, but with Dune.
No, I mean, a perfect example is The Matrix 4. Like, when I think the Wachowskis were smart in not trying to extract all of the IP possible from that franchise, but in not doing so, they allowed this thing to exist in people's minds that could have been better. And then when they were given the chance to readdress it, it's a completely different world. And I don't think that who was it, Lana, that went and took the helm? I forget whichever, Lily or Lana, whichever one took the helm, clearly wasn't trying to appease this modern audience, because the modern audience became the target of the story. So, like, I think that film will stand the test of time better than people anticipate, because it wasn't trying to appease the modern audience. But the modern audience will never get it, because it was literally attacking them. That film was made as an attack on the modern audience. So of course they're not going to like it. Of course they're not going to get it. But that was the only thing that, knowing the history of The Matrix and what The Matrix was trying to do, that was actually the only film that could have been made to be in line with the spirit of The Matrix films and not the franchise. And I think that's where, like, it felt super convoluted, and it's still it's going to be unpacked for decades on because of what it's connected to.
Hey, 25 more years until
people actually get it. That's exactly right. And I don't think I'm exaggerating, but the whole thing, the part of it, the original Matrix was a fucking love story.
Yeah.
It just happened to have kung fu in it. The original Matrix was a love story. Trinity was just as much the protagonist as if not more. No. Trinity was more so the protagonist. She knew more martial arts. She was better at martial arts most of the film than Neo. So she was more of a protagonist than him. People just couldn't accept it for like 25 years, and they had to put it in our faces in the fourth one. So we finally understood that, yeah, she was the protagonist the whole time. We just had to have Thomas carry us along as the audience because we weren't ready for a female protagonist then. We should be now, but knowing that part of the audience, still the bots, still aren't ready, that part of the audience got attacked, became the subject of mockery in the film, and then Trinity, being the protagonist the whole time, got thrown in their faces to mock them even further, which is why that film is seen as a failure.
Trinity was more Major Motoko Kusanagi than Scarlett Johansson ever could have been. Trinity was like absolutely everything that the Major was supposed to be, except the cyborg part.
But if you have a small mind, you're going to see her as just Neo's help. When in reality, she carried Neo. She carried him the whole fucking time. She brought him back to life. And it's easy to forget because she wasn't in the Matrix when she brought him back to life, and it was a kiss. She was the fucking prince. She was the prince that woke up the goddamn sleeping princess. It's so obvious now. It's so obvious now. Like, come on, man. Come on, y'all. Get with it. She was the one that fucking kissed him. Come on. But it was there the whole time. They just had to show her saving flubby Neo that can't fly, that when he tries to fly, it literally bloop. The extra sound that they made when they tried to make Neo fly, they didn't have to put that in there, but they wanted to make Neo look like a ridiculous schlub, at least for a little bit, so Trinity could come in and save the schlub. Then we finally understand that it was Trinity the whole time. It was both, they were both part of the equation. But Trinity was the one that did the most fucking ass kicking. Just do the body count. It's not even a question. But it'll take another 25 years for other people to figure that shit out.
Yeah. Neo kicking Agent Smith's ass over and over again still only counts as kicking Agent Smith's ass. It's not like he doesn't. His body count doesn't continue to add up because he gets his ass kicked more than anyone else in the movie.
And those are just brothers fighting at that point.
Yeah.
That's like bro fights. Like when you got two brothers who constantly fight and one wins one sometimes and the other one wins. That's what Neo and Smith are. Fucking Smith called the Oracle mom. There's all these layers that, oh yeah, they were there the whole time. Duh. They're brothers.
Oh. We just can't. They couldn't have done it better, I don't think.
I don't know if they could have. It takes a long time to unpack, but that's why fucking at the end, Smith just disappears into the wind, because his whole thing is he finally accepts that him and Neo are intrinsically tied together.
Yeah.
They're literally the opposite. They're the other part of each other, and he finally accepted it.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos shows produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.